Welcome to the Painting of the Week podcast, where we look at some of the most significant paintings throughout history. Introducing your hosts, Phil Grabsky and Laura Bentham.
Well, hello and welcome to Painting of the Week. And we've got a treat for you today. This is Starry Night over the Rhone by Vincent van Gogh, no less. Just as a reminder, if you go to the 7th-art.com website, or indeed the Painting of the Week YouTube channel, you can find the picture to look at while you listen. And for those of you who are listening to this on the move, in your car, having a run, or whatever, having a cycle ride, I guess, have a look before you go walking, running, or cycling, or driving. Let me start off by saying there is a more famous Starry Night by Van Gogh. So it might be worth just having a look at the painting that we're talking about, because it might not be the one you think. This is painted in Arles, only 1 or 2 minutes from where Vincent van Gogh lived, in the famous Yellow House on the Place Lamartine. And it's the river where it kind of curves around. It's painted at night, and famously, of course, has stars in the sky. Some debate about what the celestial, what it's actually referring to. Is it the Great Bear? Is it what's the other one? The Plough?
Big Dipper.
Van Gogh himself in a letter called it the Great Bear, although actually you wouldn't be able to see the Great Bear if you were looking in this direction. So it's something he's created, imagined, and put into the sky. It's not a realistic reflection of what he saw that night. Anyway, it is. I mean, I've said before on these podcasts, haven't we, Laura? We've said before that Van Gogh is, for many, their favourite artist, and there is something about Van Gogh which is just so impressive. And the closer you look at this painting and you see these bold strokes, impasto it's known as, kind of thick strokes of paint, and the closer you get, you think, how did he know that when you looked at it from a slight distance, it's somehow completely realistic, and yet of course it's completely unrealistic at the same time. But the couple at the couple who seem to be out for a nice friendly stroll, the 2 boats or sitting in the water, even the reflections of the stars, and then the curve around, and the houses and the churches, and it's done with such insight and brilliance, even though it's just a few strokes here and there. I mean, I just think it's remarkable.
Well, it's making me laugh, Phil.
Well, that's something.
I feel completely worn out every week now, because you ask me to look at a painting, and every time I look at a new painting, a new artist, this is now my new favourite one.
Again?
I'm actually exhausted.
Your living room wall, which was for your favourites,
yeah, exactly,
can have no space left.
I've got to buy a new house. I was always laughing because of the way you say about how he paints. And then people say, oh, that's just like spreading butter. Like, well, my toast doesn't look like that in the morning. That is just... This painting is so lovely.
Yeah.
And his other work, because obviously you don't get involved. I know we've got to stick to the one painting, but his work is just phenomenal. Yeah. And they were the last few years of his life.
I should say
something in it in itself.
I mean, one of the reasons that we've chosen this painting is because of the exhibition that's going to be, or has been, depending on when you listen to this podcast, at the National Gallery. It's the biggest exhibition on Van Gogh ever in Britain, which is quite something. We're recording this podcast before the exhibition has transpired. It's due to be, October, November 2024, and we will be making an exhibition on screen film about it. It has the potential, perhaps, to have the success that we had with Vermeer, the greatest exhibition. I mean, I think that Van Gogh is clearly as popular an artist as Vermeer. I guess the one significant difference is that with Vermeer, you're talking 37 paintings that we believe exist on the planet. Van Gogh, however, there are hundreds. And the exhibition is focusing on the last few years of his life when he was enormously productive.
So that's going to be completely full then?
It will have a lot of paintings in it. The thing about it is it will have some paintings that people haven't seen for decades because they've been in private collections, or have never been to England, Britain. But in these last 2 or 3 years, bear in mind with Van Gogh, he doesn't become a painter until the last 10 years of his life.
No.
He's trying other things and they don't work out for him, and then then encouraged by his brother Theo, he takes up painting. And he's a passionate man, and to understand Van Gogh, one, you have to read his letters, which will be the basis of our film actually. But everything he does, it's just because he wants to be as good as he can possibly be as an artist. So the Yellow House, for example, and the famous incident with Gogh'S, he's trying to create an artistic community in Arles.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Where he and other artists discuss art, and they paint, and they critique each other's works, and then they go to the bar and they talk more about painting, and slightly oversimplifying things, but Gogh'S was like, okay, we need to have some time off. We can't be arguing about art all the time. And that led to the famous incident where Van Gogh cuts off some or all of his ear. Anyway.
So then he comes here.
No, so that is in Arles.
Oh, that's in Arles. Okay.
So he's already in Arles, and this is 1888. This painting. He dies in 1890.
Yeah.
This is shortly before that incident. After that, he is encouraged to and he leaves Arles, ends up in the it's called the asylum in Remy, but it's just somewhere where he could go and calm down.
I read somewhere that he nearly went to a public one in Marseille, which would have had 1,000 people.
Really?
But by a stroke of luck, and probably, I don't know, maybe his brother's influence, that he ended up in that other one where there was only 41.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And then he was looking out of that window but the doctor in charge was all about gardens, music, and loved the fact that he painted and encouraged him.
Yeah, rather than just being locked up in a cell.
Yeah.
Also, my understanding of it is he's kind of self-admitted. He's not been, as I understand it, I will need to check this, but he's not condemned to go there. He's not sent there by a court and in shackles.
Right.
He knew. In fact, I've read his letters for this project, and he's aware of the mental trials and tribulations that he's facing. He talks about the difficulties of sleeping and the nightmares, and sometimes being compelled to eat paint. I mean, but on the other hand, he's so intellectual.
Yeah.
And he's so detailed and so thoughtful about his artworks.
So do you think, is that why he got so obsessed with the stars and the night? That he was, because everyone, you know yourself if you're sitting at night, and it's not often that we're lucky enough to see all the stars, especially where we live. But if you go to the south of France, Mediterranean, you're sitting outside, you've got a glass of wine, and then you start looking up. And if you're already thinking that, I don't know, I'm a bit disillusioned, I'm this and that, then you just start thinking about the universe, planet and everything. I can understand why someone would get really into painting stars.
Yes, I'm sure. I think that's a good point, and I think that's part of it. I think, it must have been until relatively recently, looking up and seeing stars, or the moon going through its phases, or the sun, must have been bewildering.
Yeah.
What on earth
Is that? But it's equally such a hard thing to paint.
But it's also an examination of light, and we can't forget. Although we know that Van Gogh painted this under gaslight, but for most of human civilization, when it got dark, it got dark. And then there were candles for those that could afford them. But for example, if you want to trace the rise of literature and the rise of the demand for the novel, then you kind of look at how that happens when there's light in the evening for people to read in the evening. Until that point, it was quite difficult to read a novel, and I mean, you could do it under a candle, but once you've got gas lighting, things change. Social life changes. Would this couple be out walking? Well, maybe there's enough light in the sky, but the fact there's gas lights along this stretch makes it more feasible. All of these things Van Gogh wants to explore. The other thing, of course, is that I had this recently on a film that we were making. It's very easy just to lock into filming during daylight.
Yeah.
But actually, we were filming in London, and I was saying to my colleagues, we need to film at night because it's just as important. There's just as many, over the course of the year, there's just as many hours of darkness as there are of light. Anyway, long story short, hard to know quite what motivated him, except he's so determined and so prolific that just doing one painting in the morning and one painting in the afternoon is not enough for him.
No.
He's out and he's painting. And of course you see this with passionate photographers now. You see this, they're out all the time just exploring.
But what I love about this painting is that he didn't... If you and I were painting the night sky, would we just do little white dots? Well, I love his stars.
Yeah.
They're so lovely. The way they almost look like little flowers, some of them.
Well, what I like about this painting is that when you start to, the thing about Van Gogh is you can like him, and one of the reasons he's so popular, and I have said this before, is that there's an immediate visceral pleasure about him. It's colourful. He's working here off blue and yellow, which is complementary colours. They're nice to look at.
Yeah.
Yellow is an attractive colour. I don't think it's entirely accidental that he focused on the sunflowers, because yellow is a really nice colour to look at. These guys studied colour theory in enormous depth, and he probably knew that if this was more green or more red or more orange, it's slightly more, you're slightly more aggravated by it.
Oh, okay. This is going to make you feel calmer.
Makes you feel calmer. When McDonald's, so I've read, when McDonald's first opened their restaurants, the seats were on a slope. You're too young to remember this. I remember in Hammersmith, must be late 1970s. I was at school. The first McDonald's opened in Hammersmith, London, and we'd go along, and you could sit on a stool, but it was at an angle, so it was uncomfortable.
Oh, okay.
And the colours were red and yellow, and they were really bright. And basically, they were deliberately chosen as uncomfortable colours
to get you out quickly.
To get you out.
Ah.
Now you go into a Costa Coffee now, one of these kind of coffee shops now, and they're browns and they're dark greens, and it's all very comfortable. It's like a library, and it's got tables and sofas. The idea now is you stay,
right,
and you buy one coffee, and you buy a treat, and you buy a sandwich, and you stay. So colour is hugely, has a huge effect on us, some of which we understand and some of which is almost subconscious. So here he's working in these blues and these yellows. You look more carefully, of course, and you start to see other colours too. But what I really like about it is how, again, it might be completely unrealistic. I'm sure the stars did not reflect on the water in those straight lines. But also look at the bay.
Yeah.
It's punctuated. It's like music.
Yeah.
That the star can't be lighting up. And what are those yellow blobs every so often? And then you start to think, well, hold on a minute. Maybe that's not the stars reflecting. Maybe actually what we're looking at here is actually the new gas lighting.
That's right. Okay. And
actually the gas lights are throwing those reflections, and the stars are just... In fact, I'm sure that's what he's doing. So like La Croisette in Cannes, or what's it called? something des Anglais in Nice. You have these long bays. And actually, if you look a bit more closely, there are some smaller dots of yellow, which might be reflecting this new gas lighting. The actual buildings, of course, these days, the lights would be on, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
But I mean,
They're just dark.
You can see the church.
Tiny bits of darks.
There's no light there.
No.
Round the back, on the right-hand side, there was a building in the distance. There's two little globules of yellow. So, you start looking, and then maybe there's the kind of cypress. I think they are, aren't they? Like kind of the Mediterranean cypresses down there. And you look closely, but all this is done in such kind of bravura.
And the brushstrokes, it's the first time I've really thought, they are really almost all going the same way, except for the odd one, which is then making the painting.
So again,
it's just so. I love this so much.
So the energy there.
It's so good.
So he's it's not an accident. He's thinking to himself, all right, the brushstrokes at the top are all going to be essentially horizontal.
Yeah.
And in fact, where you see some that are vertical, it does feel slightly odd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of interrupts the flow a little bit. But again, he's been quite thoughtful here. The sides are darker than the middle, so your eye's drawn to the middle. It almost gives a three-dimensionality to the painting that, if that sky was the same hue all the way across, the same tone all the way across, it would feel quite flat. This actually feels like the sides are nearer to us, being darker somehow. And it's that old trick of Leonardo da Vinci where, the sky is a pale yellow and it draws your eye to the back of This is a flat canvas, but when you look at it, you don't feel it's flat at all.
Oh, no.
You feel you're looking at something that's like a mile wide or a kilometre wide.
No, it's just stunning. It's a beautiful painting.
But then when you look at the water,
again,
they're all kind of essentially left to right. But again, he's starting to get some diagonals. When you reach the point on which he's standing and that couple are standing, then it all changes. Then it becomes diagonal, top left to bottom right. More greens, lighter blues.
And the silhouette of those boats, they're lovely.
They're brilliant,
aren't they?
And they're very finely done. He's a great draftsman. I mean, often I think even in this case, often he would have, he'd write to his letter. He'd write letters to his brother all the time with little sketches of what he'd been doing, and they're really fine. I mean, there's no question that he was a master artist, and this isn't, there's always a mistake to think that this was the only way he could paint. Not at all. He's arrived here having studied other artists, having talked about it, thought about it, and in fact even gone through his own transition from much darker hues. You think there's a painting called The Potato Eaters, which almost couldn't be more different.
No. Is that because of when he got to the south of France, the light struck him?
No, it precedes that really. He's already, he's in Paris. Part of it is, and we dealt with this in our film Van Gogh and Japan. He's very influenced by Japanese art, which arrives into France in the middle of the 19th century. Japan had been closed. Did a little bit of trade with the Netherlands, but essentially closed. And then it opens up. And one of the things that starts arriving in Europe is art. And artists like Monet, Degas, Van Gogh, they're absolutely transfixed by this Japanese art. They've never seen anything like it.
No.
And there's a number of elements to that. But you think about some of the Japanese paintings are like cherry trees, for example. And anyway, Van Gogh doesn't want to go to Japan. He thinks that's not possible. But for him, the south of France feels like that could be his Japan.
Oh, okay.
Part of that is the light, but part of it is also, the blossom, and part of it is also, an artist's. Renoir's another one. Matisse, there's enormous difference between the light of northern France and southern France.
Yeah.
It's a part of that. There's also, Paris was, whilst it was considerably smaller and less populated than it is today, it was still a very active city, and that was aggravating Van Gogh. That's why after Arles and after Remy, he doesn't go back to Paris. In fact, his brother makes sure he goes to stay with a guy called Dr. Gachet in Auvers-sur-Oise, which is just a little bit north of Paris, where again I think he does some like 90 paintings in 80 days. I mean, he's just so.
This is after he's come out of the asylum, though. But did he? And that's where he ends up. Yeah, doesn't live very much longer though, does he? After?
No, so basically he's there for a few months and then he kills himself.
It's quite.
Unfortunate.
But I thought he was quite. It's quite funny, isn't it? Because when you think of asylums at that time, you think, "Oh my goodness me," you know.
The opening scene of Amadeus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the next day, wasn't it? The next day when he was there, that he did the irises, which is just an extraordinary painting. And then wouldn't you just what?
It's more. I mean,
to
it was
there for that year to do those paintings that he did.
I mean, I've been to that asylum, and it's almost like a retreat, really. It was just like he was just cutting himself off from the world and allowing himself to calm down. And you're right to point out that the person in charge allowed him to paint, encouraged him to paint. And of course, we're lucky that all the paintings survived.
I was going to say, lucky for everybody else. Yeah. But it's just so sad that he came out and then just couldn't cope with life again.
It's, you know... I mean, one has to be a bit cautious about, you know... I'm pretty convinced that he does shoot himself. And whether he was intending to kill himself or not, who can tell? But, I mean, you still don't shoot yourself in the stomach without trying to do some serious damage. But he'd been painting that morning.
Oh, had he? I didn't know that.
And, you know, in our film, Van Gogh, A New Way of Seeing, you know, we show you the last painting that he ever worked on. It's just, I mean, you know, why people are sometimes clearly pushed to their absolute limit, and that seemed to happen with him.
But did he also feel like a failure towards the end, or was he never felt that he achieved?
Well, famously, he never. Well, what people say is he never sold a painting. That's not entirely true. But he didn't sell many.
Right.
A handful.
And because he didn't sell them, that was.
But he wasn't actually that. I mean, slight mixed messages here. But on the one hand, he wasn't really that bothered about it because he wasn't trying to make. He wasn't painting to make money. That said, there's certainly, we know that there are times, for example, when he started doing flowers in vases, for example, that was partly because his brother said those are the types of paintings that sell.
Oh, okay.
That's the kind of thing people are looking for.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of him wanting to make sales, and clearly he really struggled with poverty. And if it wasn't for his brother supporting him and sending him money for the occasion, you know, canvases or paints, or but I mean, he's living right on the edge of poverty the whole time. So I'm sure he, you know, I don't think anyone chooses that. I think he would have liked the respect of his peers.
Oh, okay.
I think he struggled with people who criticised his work.
Yeah,
but then, you know, he'd seen what happened to the Impressionists and how they were mocked. So he's kind of understands that those on the cutting edge of art are often going to be criticised by those who are more conservative and afraid of change, or don't understand change, or don't like the change. But I mean, there does seem to be, and he even talks about it himself, there's a part of his character that was, you know, unsettled, you know, and he. You know, he'd struggled trying to be a teacher. He'd struggled trying to be a preacher. He'd struggled trying to be an art dealer. People got frustrated with him, and he got frustrated with himself, and he went too far. And
it's funny, isn't it? Those, because of the Starry Night, which is not long after this one, is such a stunning painting.
Does he paint that after this one?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Well, that's what I read.
Yeah. Okay.
When he got to the institution, when he got to the asylum.
Oh, is Starry Night done when he's in Rhone?
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Well, that's what I thought. That's what I read.
Okay.
I probably didn't read the same books as you, Phil. But yeah, so I just think, they're just such wonderful paintings that people would have to criticise, I suppose, because maybe it was because he'd been in an asylum later that he's come away from asylum with people not going to respect him at all, or
Well, it's amazing that, I mean,
so easy to judge.
you had a very conservative Catholic dealer called Paul Durand-Ruel who risks, he almost goes bankrupt twice, selling Impressionist paintings.
Right.
And nobody really wanted them in Europe. He takes a risk and he goes to America. He does find a market. But even he found Van Gogh was too extreme.
Right, okay.
But, when Van Gogh dies in the bar, the auberge in Auvers-sur-Oise, he's in the top floor bedroom and he dies, and they've got his coffin in the restaurant bar downstairs, and they've got paintings all around the walls, some of which are kind of still wet.
Yeah.
It's kind of been given away. But yet, it was only a year or two later that all of a sudden people started to realise, this guy was... what have we lost? You know.
Yeah.
To us, it's extraordinary. Someone would paint this,
Yeah.
and he probably took it back to the Yellow House, and it just stood on the wall. And you think someone would snap it up. It is pretty radical, though. I mean, if you think about, it's going way well. I don't know. I mean, 1874, you've got Monet, Impression Sunrise, and the Le Havre and the water. It's not. This is only 14 years later. It's not a million miles from what Monet was doing, really, and the other Impressionists, to us, but maybe to the contemporary art buyers and collectors, it was just one step too far.
Because of the sort of lack of detail, just the colours, just because it was too different. Because even like we were looking at the couple, and the face is just a swirl.
Yeah,
it's amazing. And yet back, sort of like when you look away, you can just about make out sort of two eyes and little hats.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I mean,
that is just too much. For look at the hands.
She's she's credible, isn't she?
It's just.
And he's got. You were saying about the straw hat.
It might be him. It might be a self-portrait, as we always laughed, didn't we? They always pop themselves in the paintings. I mean,
he has. We'll talk about this in the film. He has one really significant relationship with a woman called Seine, and or Sen, and that he writes about her in the letters so often between him and his brother, and she has a child, and maybe has another child, maybe his, may not be his, anyway. But that had finished by this point, so
right, yeah.
I don't know who that could be. If it is him,
well, I said to you, didn't I, that I think it might be the wife of the proprietor of the Café de la Guerre that he was. I think he had actually stayed in as well.
Oh, okay.
He was quite fond of her.
Maybe.
But she didn't. Well, she liked him, but she didn't, want to get involved with him.
So maybe he's introduced into this painting a sense of loss.
Maybe. Would he known by then that he was going to go into the asylum? But then you said, which was then
that
more of a retreat.
No, that was. I think that was prompted by the incident with his ear.
Right.
So
because there would have been a stigma attached to that, surely. That he'd been in there and people. I don't know. Would there not have been?
You'd imagine so, but I mean.
Because then it would be easier to criticise someone's art.
You would imagine so, yeah.
If someone's in an asylum and they're painting paintings like the Starry Night.
But I mean, then you start to think, well, I wonder whether the two boats are also, a couple, and he's suggesting that they could sail off into the future together, and I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But, you might just have painted two boats. I mean, one has to be careful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. We're allowed to say what we want, but no, it's only our opinion.
I think what's really fascinating about this is that he would have painted this very quickly.
Yeah.
And if you just look at the skill, just look at where he's used black. So, like, again, on the left side around that church steeple, just little squiggles of black, but it's just creating a sense of a town. Even at the edge of the water, you've got the blues, but you've also got these pools of black. And what it's doing is it's just creating this three-dimensional feel, this feel of depth. It's not just one continuous block of colour which
No.
would feel very flat. This is drawing you in, and of course with the light, in most cases it's smaller in the distance and larger as you get towards us.
And actually, what's going to be lovely is when the exhibition comes.
Oh, seeing this up close. Yeah.
Then there is just going to be a whole different colour palette completely.
Yeah.
We're going to think we're looking at just 3-4 colours here. No.
This could be.
There's going to be all sorts going on.
There's going to be some, the exhibition will contain some absolutely extraordinary paintings. This is definitely one of them. This is one that,
I can't wait.
people will see this on a big screen in cinemas, through our film around the world, but when you come face to face with it,
Yeah. Well, then it's up to you, isn't it, camera work, to get the colours out. Good luck, Phil.
Well, it's amazing how. You have to be very careful with that because it's affected by the lighting in the gallery.
Yeah.
And then you get to the post-production, and it's been through a technical process. And you also have to take into account, projectors in cinemas and what they do to colour. And
So we have to see it with our own eyes, hopefully, and then it's up to you.
bear in mind too that he is very poor.
Mm.
Oil paints are not cheap,
No.
but he's not scrimping and saving here.
No.
He's squeezing out the colour and he's laying it on.
Did he use a knife mainly? No.
Palette knife. Well, he sometimes, but this is brushwork.
Oh,
largely.
okay. Yeah, it's amazing. In actual fact, every time I do this podcast, I always want to go home and paint.
Well, that's great.
It is great.
Have you ever done it?
I did a bit of colouring the other day, but only because I was rushing around. I thought, I got the old, when the children were little, we used to have a box of pencils and all sorts in the car. Mm. And I found all the colouring crayons. It's like, I'll have a little 5 minutes. Mm. But I must admit, I would like to go and find a few paints. Paints are still expensive, mind you.
There was a moment during COVID when everyone was doing colouring in books, weren't they?
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, actually, it's funny because it doesn't make me want to paint because I know I can't, but it does make me want to photograph.
Okay, perfect.
So I guess that's a creative.
So that's
stimulus.
Actually really, really good that both of us are looking at a painting and then we want to go and do something creative. Mm. I wonder if that's what he wanted us to do, or did he want us to continue with a nice glass of red on a balcony looking at that scene, which is quite spectacular.
Well, that's an interesting question. What did he expect of his audience?
What his audience? We won't know.
Again, the film about this exhibition is going to be driven by his letters, which I and David have been through, and some of the things we've been looking for is what is motivating him, what is he trying to communicate, and some of that, and he's very literate.
Oh yes, quite.
And he talks a lot about not in his own life but also his art. It's such a refreshing change to when we did Vermeer, there's basically nothing.
No.
Klimt wrote very little. It makes such a difference when you've got an artist who, like Monet, who wrote a lot down because they reveal themselves in their letters, and Van Gogh certainly does. He's for me, he's right up there in terms of his letters with letters of Mozart or Beethoven that tell you so much about the individual.
That's going to be so good. I can't imagine reading those. It'll be brilliant. But yeah.
Well,
he was super productive. So yeah.
Well, I'm always
studying my notes.
I'm always aware that you do.
Which I have a lot.
Is there any super story?
No, because you've done the colour theories. I had all that.
Okay.
I've done
colour theories. I find colour theory really interesting. How our brains, and whether that was, and at what point that develops. The way that our brain works with colour.
It's quite funny though, the colour theories. I don't know much about them particularly. I just happened to see that he was quite into them and things like that. But it's like rules, isn't it? There's always those funny little rules, and I think people always just want to break a rule. So then I think that wouldn't you just want to mix and match?
Yeah.
In just completely the other direction of the theory.
Okay, so the next stage is you start doing your gaslight in pink.
Well, exactly.
And of course, that's when we start hitting the 20th century. That's what people start doing.
Yeah.
Start playing around with it. I mean, Matisse, when he, his amazing paintings, but they're not realistic. He's doing all sorts of colours.
Yeah.
So it's true. There's a not conservatism, but the yellow light is reflected.
Yeah.
In yellow, rather than in red.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the same though, would it? I'm not sure I would like it so much. I love that painting.
Fascinating. Well, on that,
let's go.
See you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Painting of the Week podcast. For more information, please visit our website at seventh-art.com or contact us by emailing info@seventh-art.com. See you next time.